The fog rolled thick across Portsmouth Harbor that November morning. Through the mist, a sleek white yacht sat anchored far from the tourist docks. Its name was painted in gold letters, Serenity. But there was nothing peaceful about what was happening on board. Royal guards in plain clothes stood on the pier, their eyes fixed on the vessel. They had been watching for 3 days, waiting, listening, gathering evidence of something could shake the crown to its foundation. Inside the yacht's main cabin, Queen Consort Camilla stood frozen. Her hands trembled as she stared at the wooden crate on the polished table. The lid was open. Velvet boxers lined the interior, each one holding a piece of history, each one holding a crime. The late Queen Elizabeth's sapphire necklace, the diamond tiara worn at coronations, emerald bracelets that had sparkled under ballroom lights for generations. All of it packed carefully like merchandise. All of it about to be shipped across the Atlantic. A phone buzzed on the table. Camilla reached for it with shaking fingers. The message was brief. They know. Get out now. Her heart hammered in her chest. How could they know? She had been so careful. The arrangements had been made in whispers and shadows, through people who owed her silence, but secrets in the royal family never stayed buried for long. If you're hooked already, make sure you're subscribed because this story gets even more unbelievable. Hit that button and let's continue. 3 months earlier, the plan had seemed simple. Camilla's American contact, a wealthy art dealer named Richard Townsend, had made her an offer she couldn't refuse. $10 million. Cash. Untraceable. All she had to do was deliver a collection of royal jewels that no one would miss, at least. That's what she told herself. The pieces she chose weren't the famous ones. They weren't the crown jewels locked behind bulletproof glass. These were the forgotten treasures. Items stored in palace vaults, cataloged but rarely displayed. Things the public didn't know existed. Things she thought she could steal without. Consequence? Townsend had connections in New York. Private collectors who didn't ask questions. People who paid fortunes for objects with royal blood in their history. He promised her the money would be wired to an offshore account. Clean, invisible. A safety net for a future she feared might slip away. Because Camilla knew the truth that kept her awake at night. She was not beloved. She would never be Diana, and if the public turned on her completely, the family cast her aside, she needed something of her own. So she made a choice. A terrible, desperate choice. The yacht had been rented under a false name. The crew was paid extra to stay silent. The crate was labeled as personal effects in shipping documents. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail, but someone had been watching. Someone had seen the late-night meetings, the strange visitors to Clarence's house, the unusual requests to access the royal vaults. And that someone had reported it to the one person who could act without hesitation. King Charles now. Standing in the cabin with her phone in hand, Camilla realized her mistake. She had underestimated the loyalty of those around her. She had thought her title would protect her. She was wrong. Outside, the guards received their orders. 3 cars pulled up to the dock. Men in dark suits stepped out, their faces hard and professional. They moved toward the yacht with purpose. There was no escape now. The water was too cold. The harbor too watched. And even if she ran, where would a queen consort hide? Camilla looked at the jewels one last time. They sparkled even in the dim cabin light, beautiful and cursed. She wondered if the late queen was watching from somewhere beyond. If Elizabeth knew her daughter-in-law had tried to sell her legacy. A knock echoed against the hull, heavy, final. The guards had arrived. Camilla's breathing grew shallow. The knock came again, louder this time. More insistent, she closed the crate lid and pushed it toward the corner of the cabin. Stupid, pointless. They already knew what was inside. But panic made people do foolish things, Your Majesty. The voice came from outside, muffled by the yacht's walls. We need you to open the door. She recognized that voice. Commander James Whitmore, head of Royal Protection. A man who had guarded her for years. A man she had trusted. Her hand went to her chest, pressing against the silk blouse that suddenly felt too tight. She wanted to scream. to cry. To wake up and find this was all a nightmare. But the cold metal handle of the door was real. The jewels in the crate were real. And the consequences waiting outside were very, very real. She opened the door. Whitmore stood there, his face unreadable. Behind him, 4 other guards formed a wall of authority. They weren't pointing weapons. They didn't need to. Their presence was threat enough. "May we come in?" Whitmore asked. His tone was professional, but his eyes held something else. Disappointment. Camilla stepped aside. She had no choice. They entered the cabin like ghosts, silent and efficient. One guard went straight to the crate. Another began photographing everything with a small camera. Whitmore stood in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. "Where is Mr. Townsend?" he asked. Her blood turned to ice. They knew about Richard. They knew everything. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice cracked. Whitmore tilted his head slightly. "Your Majesty, we've been monitoring your communications for 2 weeks. We have recordings. Bank transfer records. Surveillance footage of your meetings in London. We know about the arrangement. We know about the $10 million. The room seemed to spin. 2 weeks. They had been watching for 2 weeks while she walked around believing she was clever. Believing she was safe? "This is a misunderstanding," she whispered. Whitmore's expression didn't change. The crate contains 17 pieces from the royal collection. Items recorded in the palace inventory. Items that belong to the crown, not to you. One of the guards opened the crate fully. The velvet boxes gleamed under the cabin lights. He lifted the sapphire necklace carefully, holding it up like evidence in a courtroom. It had been Queen Elizabeth's favorite. She wore it to her golden jubilee. The photographs were legendary, and Camilla had tried to sell it. "I want to speak to my husband," she said, her voice steadier now. Anger was replacing fear. "I want to speak to the king." Whitmore nodded slowly. "His Majesty is aware. He's the one who ordered this operation." Those words hit harder than any accusation. Charles knew. Charles had sent them. The man she married, the man who had fought his entire life to be with her, had authorized her arrest. "He wouldn't," she said. But even as the words left her lips, she knew the truth. Charles was king now. His mother's legacy was his responsibility. And love, no matter how deep, couldn't compete with duty to the crown. Whitmore pulled a folded document from his jacket. "This is a warrant authorizing the seizure of stolen property and your detention for questioning. You have the right to legal counsel. You will be transported to a secure location where formal charges will be discussed." Camilla's legs felt weak. She sank into the leather chair by the window. Outside, the fog was lifting. She could see the harbor clearly now. The normal world going about its normal business while hers collapsed. "Why would you do this?" Whitmore asked quietly. The professional mask slipped for just a moment. "You had everything. Respect, position, security. Why risk it all?" She looked up at him, tears finally breaking free. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." She laughed bitterly. "I'm the woman who destroyed a fairy tale. I'm the villain in their story. Diana's ghost follows me everywhere. Every poll, every article, every whisper behind my back. I wanted something that was mine, something they couldn't take away." Whitmore said nothing. What could he say? The truth was ugly and human and desperate. "Mr. Townsend has been detained in New York," he continued. "He attempted to board a flight to Switzerland this morning. The FBI arrested him at JFK. He's cooperating fully." Of course he was. Men like Richard always save themselves first. The guard who had been photographing the evidence stepped forward. "Sir, we've documented everything. Ready for transport?" Whitmore nodded. He looked at Camilla one last time. "Your Majesty, we need to leave now." She stood slowly, smoothing her skirt out of habit. Even in disaster, appearances mattered. It was a lesson beaten into every royal from birth. As they escorted her off the yacht, cameras flashed from the dock. Someone had tipped off the press. Of course they had. This was too big to contain. Reporters shouted questions. "Your Majesty, Is it true? Did you steal the jewels? Where were you taking them? She kept her head high, her face blank. Let them speculate. Let them destroy her. She had already destroyed herself. The car door closed, sealing her inside. Through the tinted window, she watched the yacht grow smaller. Her last desperate grasp at independence floating in the gray water, and somewhere in London. In the palace she once called home, Charles was making decisions about her future. The secure location turned out to be a private estate in the countryside. Far from cameras, far from curious eyes. It was the kind of place where royal scandals went to be managed quietly. Camilla sat in a drawing room that smelled of old wood and lavender. A fire crackled in the hearth, but it did nothing to warm her. 2 guards stood by the door, silent, watchful. She had been there for 6 hours. No phone, no contact with the outside world. Just waiting, the door finally opened. A woman entered, 50-ish, with sharp eyes and an expensive suit. She carried a leather briefcase and the air of someone who fixed impossible problems for powerful people. Your Majesty. The woman sat across from her without invitation. My name is Patricia Hensworth. I'm a private attorney retained by the royal household. I'm here to explain your situation. Want to speak to Charles, Camilla said. Patricia opened her briefcase calmly. The king has made it clear he will not communicate with you directly until this matter is resolved. I'm authorized to speak on his behalf. The words stung more than they should have. Years of being the other woman, the scandal, the home wrecker. She thought all that was behind her. She thought marriage made her safe. How naive. Patricia pulled out a folder. The evidence against you is substantial. 17 pieces of royal property. Communications with Mr. Townsend detailing the sale. Bank account information showing your intended payment. If this goes to trial, you will lose. Publicly, spectacularly. Camilla's throat tightened. What does he want? The king wants to avoid a trial. He wants to protect the monarchy from further damage. He's prepared to offer you an agreement. What kind of agreement? Patricia slid a document across the coffee table. You will abdicate your position as queen consort. Effective immediately. You will issue a statement citing health concerns and personal reasons. You will leave the country quietly and live in exile. A property has been arranged in France. You'll receive a modest allowance, but you will surrender all royal titles and privileges. The room tilted. Leave the country. Lose everything. Become a ghost. And if I refuse? Patricia's expression didn't change. Then you will be charged with theft of crown property. The trial will be public. Every detail will be exposed. Your reputation, what little remains, will be destroyed completely. You'll likely face prison time. Prison? Camilla laughed, but it sounded broken. They would put me in prison. The law applies to everyone, Your Majesty. Even you. Silence filled the room. The fire popped and hissed. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows. Camilla thought of Diana. She wondered if this was karma, if somewhere in the universe there was justice for the pain she had caused, for the marriage she had helped destroy, for the princess who died hated and alone. Maybe this was her turn. How long do I have to decide? She asked. 24 hours. After that, the decision will be made for you. Patricia stood, smoothing her skirt. I know this seems cruel, but the king is trying to protect you. A trial would be brutal. The press would tear you apart. This way, you disappear quietly. You keep your dignity. And in time, people forget. People never forget, Camilla whispered. Patricia paused at the door. Then at least they won't have new reasons to hate you. When she left, Camilla was alone again. She moved to the window and stared out at the rain. Gray sky, gray fields, gray future. She thought about the choices that led here. The affair that started in youth and never really ended. The determination to become queen, no matter the cost. The belief that love would be enough. But love was never enough in the royal family. Duty came first, always. Her phone returned just an hour ago with strict monitoring buzzed once. A message from a number she didn't recognize. When she opened it, her breath caught. It was from Charles. Just 3 words. "I'm sorry, Camilla. Sorry." As if sorry could erase decades. As if sorry could rebuild what had been broken. She typed back with shaking hands. "Were we ever real?" The response came quickly. Once, long ago, she set the phone down and let the tears come. Not dramatic sobs. Just quiet, exhausted crying. The kind that came from knowing you had lost everything, and it was your own fault. The jewels were back in the palace by now. Cleaned, catalogued, locked away as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. A queen consort had tried to steal her way to freedom, and the monarchy had moved swiftly to erase her. By morning, the decision felt inevitable. She would sign the papers. She would leave England. She would become what she had always been underneath the titles and the ceremony. Just a woman who wanted to. Patricia returned at dawn with the official documents. Camilla signed them without reading. What was the point? The outcome was decided the moment those guards knocked on the yacht door. "There will be a car waiting at noon," Patricia said. "It will take you to a private airfield. From there, France. The property is comfortable. You won't want for basic necessities." Basic necessities. From palaces to basic necessities in one terrible week. "What will they tell the public?" Camilla asked. "That you're stepping back due to health concerns. Stress-related, the public will sympathize briefly, then forget. That's how these things work." Camilla nodded. She had no energy left to fight. As Patricia packed up her briefcase, she paused. "For what it's worth, I've seen worse scandals. You're not the first royal to make a catastrophic mistake. You won't be the last. That's supposed to comfort me? No. It's supposed to remind you that you're human. Humans make mistakes. Even queens." When noon came, Camilla walked to the waiting car with her head high. The guards who had arrested her watched from the doorway. She wondered what they thought. If they pitied her or despised her, probably both. The car pulled away from the estate, taking her toward an airplane and a new life she never wanted. Through the rear window, she watched England disappear, the country that made her queen. The country that destroyed her, and somewhere in London, Charles sat in a study, staring at his mother's portrait, wondering if he had made the right choice. The house in Provence was beautiful in the way that prisons for the privileged often are. Stone walls covered in ivy, a garden with lavender and roses, views of rolling hills that stretched toward the horizon. Camilla stood on the terrace that first evening, a glass of wine in her hand, and felt nothing. No relief, no sadness, just emptiness. The staff had been carefully selected. A housekeeper named Marie, who spoke minimal English. A groundskeeper who kept his distance. People who would serve her, but never know her. People who had signed agreements thicker than novels, promising silence. She was a secret now. A mistake filed away. Inside the house was furnished with expensive anonymity. Nothing personal. Nothing that connected to her past. The artwork was generic French countryside scenes. The books on the shelves were in French, a language she barely spoke. It was exile, dressed up as retirement. Her phone had been replaced, with a new one monitored, restricted. She could call a small list of approved numbers. She could browse certain websites. Everything else was blocked. She tried calling Charles that first night. The number rang once, then disconnected. He had blocked her completely. 40 years. That's how long she had loved him. Through scandal and separation, through Diana's death and public hatred, through everything. And now, he had erased her like she never existed. The official statement had been released that afternoon, brief, clinical. Queen consort Camilla has decided to step back from public duties due to ongoing health concerns. The royal family wishes her well in her recovery and asks for privacy during this time. The press had reacted with surprising sympathy at first. Then the questions started. What health concerns? Why so sudden? Where was she staying? Within 2 days, rumors began. Anonymous sources whispered about a scandal, about missing jewels, about FBI involvement in New York. The palace refused to comment, which only made the speculation grow louder. Camilla watched it all from her exile, reading articles on her restricted phone, watching her name get torn apart on social media, seeing conspiracy theories bloom like poisonous flowers. Some people guessed the truth. Most didn't believe it. A queen stealing jewels? Impossible. Too dramatic. Too American, but the ones who believed dug deeper. They found connections to Richard Townsend. They discovered the yacht rental. They pieced together enough truth to make the palace nervous. On the 5th day, a second statement was released. This one had more teeth. Recent allegations regarding the former queen consort are being reviewed by appropriate authorities. The royal family has cooperated fully with all investigations. We will not be commenting further. Former queen consort. They had stripped her title publicly now. Camilla read those words over and over. Former. As if she had never mattered. As if the crown on her head had been made of paper, Marie knocked softly on the bedroom door that evening. "Madame, there is a call for you." Camilla's heart jumped. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe, but the voice on the phone was female, crisp, British. Patricia Hensworth. "I'm calling to inform you that Mr. Townsend has pled guilty to trafficking in stolen property. He's agreed to testify about your involvement in exchange for a reduced sentence." The room felt cold suddenly. Testify. I thought this was finished. It is, as far as you're concerned. You're out of reach in France. But his testimony is being documented. Sealed records. Insurance, in case you ever decide to cause problems. I'm not going to cause problems, Camilla said bitterly. I'm trapped in a house in the middle of nowhere with no life and no future. Good. Keep it that way. Patricia's tone was almost sympathetic. I know this is difficult, but you made choices, Your Majesty. Choices have consequences. After she hung up, Camilla threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. Immediately, she regretted it. That phone was her only connection to anything. Marie appeared minutes later with a broom and a replacement phone. She swept up the pieces without comment. The new phone was identical to the old one. They had planned for this. For her breaking down how humiliating, the weeks blurred together. She woke up. She ate meals she didn't taste. She walked the gardens. She went to sleep. Repeat. Letters arrived occasionally. Not from Charles. Never from Charles. But from people she used to know. Distant relatives, former friends. The messages were always the same. Supportive but vague. Thinking of you, wishing you well. Time heals. Empty words from people who didn't really care. Only one letter felt genuine. It came from an unexpected source. Princess Anne, Charles's sister, had never liked Camilla much. She was Diana's friend. She had called the affair a disgrace publicly. But her letter was direct and honest in a way nothing else had been. You were foolish, Anne wrote in her sharp handwriting. But you were also desperate. I understand desperation. This family creates it, feeds on it. I won't pretend to forgive you, but I don't hate you either. You're just another person who got crushed by the weight of the crown. There have been many before you. There will be many after. Camilla read that letter a dozen times. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. And somehow, that mattered. Winter came. The lavender died back. The hills turned brown. Camilla watched the seasons change from her terrace and wondered if this was how she would spend the rest of her life, forgotten, hidden, waiting for nothing. One December morning, Marie brought breakfast and a newspaper. French, but with an English section. Camilla almost didn't look. She had stopped reading news about the royal family. It hurt too much, but something caught her eye. A small article buried on page 6. King Charles announces engagement to childhood friend Lady Amanda Natchbell. Wedding planned for spring? The coffee cup slipped from her hand. It shattered on the terrace stones, brown liquid spreading like blood. Engaged. He was engaged. 6 months after she disappeared, he had already moved on. Lady Amanda, Charles's first love. The woman he proposed 2 decades ago, before duty pulled them apart. The acceptable choice. The safe choice. The choice that wouldn't cause scandal. Camilla stood there, staring at the photograph of Charles and Amanda smiling. They looked happy, peaceful, like 2 people who had finally found their way to each other, and she realized, with brutal clarity, that he had been planning this. Maybe not consciously. But the moment she was removed, he had reached for the life he always wanted. The life he couldn't have when she was in it. She had been the complication. The problem. The mistake he finally had an excuse to fix. The betrayal of it broke something inside her. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet crack, like ice giving way. She walked to the edge of the terrace. The hills stretched empty and endless. She could walk into them and disappear. Who would notice? Who would care? But even as the thought formed, she knew she wouldn't. It's because spite was still alive in her. Anger was still burning. And somewhere, deep down, she wanted to survive this. Not for happiness. Not for redemption. But to prove she was stronger than they thought. The palace had exiled her. Charles had replaced her. The public had forgotten her. But she was still here. Still breathing. Still fighting. And maybe that would have to be enough. Spring arrived in Provence with violence. Flowers exploded across the hills. The garden came alive with color. Everything bloomed except Camilla. She had stopped sleeping well. The night stretched long and dark, filled with thoughts that circled like vultures. What if she had never taken the jewels? What if she had been content with what she had? But regret was a useless emotion. The past couldn't be changed, only endured. Marie noticed the change. The weight loss. The hollow eyes. One morning, she brought breakfast and spoke in her broken English. Madame must eat. Madame must live. Camilla looked at the croissants and coffee. Why? Marie frowned, searching for words. Because giving up is, how you say, letting them win. Such simple wisdom from a housekeeper. But it landed harder than any therapy session could have. Them. The palace. Charles. The system that had chewed her up and spit her out. If she wasted away in this house, they would call it justice. Proof she was always weak, always unworthy. So she started eating again. Small amounts at first, then more. She began walking the hills, pushing her body until her lungs burned. If she couldn't control her circumstances, she could at least control herself. The wedding was scheduled for April 15th. Camilla marked it on the calendar in her mind. The day Charles would marry someone else. Someone better. Someone who had never stolen anything. She told herself she wouldn't watch. Wouldn't torture herself with images of his happiness. But when the day came, she couldn't help it. The French television stations covered it extensively. British royalty always drew crowds. She sat in the drawing room, glass of wine in hand. Watching Charles take vows with Amanda, Amanda looked radiant, elegant, appropriate. Everything Camilla had tried to be, but never quite managed. Charles looked relieved. That's what gutted her most. Not sadness. Not regret. Just relief. Like he had been carrying a burden and finally set it down. She had been that burden. The ceremony was smaller than his first. Wedding to Diana? No massive cathedral. No million watching worldwide. Just family and close friends at Windsor. Intimate, tasteful, everything he'd probably wanted the first time when they kissed. Camilla turned off the television. She sat in silence for a long time, feeling something shift inside her. Not healing, not forgiveness, but acceptance. She had lost, completely, irreversibly, and somehow, knowing it was final made it easier to breathe. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not from Charles, not from Patricia. From someone she hadn't thought about in months, Richard Townsend. The envelope had been forwarded through multiple addresses. It's heavily monitored, barely legal. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in small handwriting. "They're making me the villain," he wrote. "The American con man who seduced a queen into crime. But we both know the truth. You contacted me? You wanted this. I was just the tool you used." Camilla's hand shook as she read. "I'm serving 8 years in federal prison. My reputation is destroyed. My business is gone. My family won't speak to me, and you? You're living in a villa in France, drinking wine, walking gardens. Tell me, Your Majesty, how is that justice?" She crumpled the letter and threw it in the fireplace. Watched it burn until only ash remained. He was right, of course. She had gotten away with it, in a sense. No trial, no prison, just exile. Comfortable, suffocating exile. But freedom looked different from the outside. Richard didn't understand that some prisons had no bars. That night, she wrote her own letter. Not to Richard. To Charles. She knew he would never read it. Knew Patricia or some other gatekeeper would intercept it, but she wrote it anyway. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it. I just want you to know that I understand now. You were always going to choose the crown over me. I just gave you the perfect excuse. Maybe I even wanted you to. Maybe I sabotaged everything because I knew, deep down, I didn't belong. That I was playing a role I could never truly fill. Diana's ghost was always there, wasn't it? In every room, every speech, every public appearance, I tried to replace her, and the universe punished me for the arrogance. I hope Amanda makes you happy. I hope she's everything I couldn't be. And I hope someday, when you're old and tired, you'll remember that I loved you. Even if I loved you badly. Even if I destroyed everything we built. It was real. Once. That has to count for something." She sealed the letter and gave it to Marie to mail. It felt like releasing a breath she'd been holding for months. Days later, an envelope arrived in return. Her letter, unopened, with a note from the palace secretary returned to sender. Addressee refuses correspondence. Charles wouldn't even open it. Wouldn't even read her words. She was erased so completely that even her apology was rejected. Camilla laughed then. A real, honest laugh. Because it was so perfectly cruel, it almost became funny. She had lost everything, but at least she knew where she stood. There was clarity in total rejection. No ambiguity. No false hope. She was alone. She would always be alone, and she needed to build a life around that truth. Marie found her in the garden that afternoon, pulling weeds with bare hands, dirt under her fingernails, sun on her face. "Madame, you have gardener for this," Marie said. Confused, Camilla looked up, squinting against the light. "I need to do something real, something that grows." Marie smiled then, understanding in a way words couldn't capture. "Then I help." They worked side by side until sunset. Two women, different in every way, finding companionship in silence and soil. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. A small something. And small things, Camilla was learning, were all that exile offered. That night, she slept without nightmares for the first time in months. When she woke, the sun was streaming through the windows. The house smelled like coffee and bread. She had survived the wedding. Survived the rejection. Survived the worst of it. Now came the harder part. Learning to live with what remained. The woman in the mirror looked older, thinner, tired, but still standing. Still breathing. Still here. And maybe, just maybe, that was a kind of victory too. 2 years passed like water through fingers. Seasons changed. The garden flourished under Camilla's care. She learned French slowly, awkwardly, but enough to have simple conversations with Marie. The world moved on without her. Charles and Amanda had a quiet, dignified marriage. The press loved Amanda in ways they never loved Camilla. She was gracious, appropriate, boring, in the best possible way. The jewel scandal faded from headlines, became a footnote. A strange story people half remembered. Didn't something happen with Camilla? Theft or something. Camilla herself became a ghost story. Occasionally, a tabloid would run a "Where is she now?" Peace with old photographs and speculation. But mostly, she was forgotten. Which was exactly what the palace wanted. She built a small life in the margins. She volunteered at a local animal shelter, anonymously. The dogs didn't care who she used to be. They just wanted walks and kindness. She read voraciously. Books she never had time for when she was queen consort. Novels about women who survived impossible things. Memoirs of people who lost everything and rebuilt from ashdod. She learned to cook badly at first, then better. Marie taught her. They spent long afternoons in the kitchen, making meals no one but them would eat. She became, against all odds, almost content, not happy. Happiness felt like too much to ask. But content, peaceful, present, until the day Patricia Hensworth called. "We need to talk," Patricia said, her voice tight. In person. Dread pooled in Camilla's stomach. "Why? What happened?" "I'll be there tomorrow. 11 o'clock. The line went dead. Camilla spent the night pacing. What could be wrong? She had kept every rule, stayed hidden, caused no problems. What more did they want from her? Patricia arrived exactly on time, carrying the same leather briefcase, wearing the same kind of expensive suit. But her face was different, worried. They sat in the drawing room. Marie brought coffee and disappeared. "There's been a development," Patricia began. "The sealed records from Richard Townsend's case, they've been leaked." Camilla's blood turned cold. Leaked? How? "We don't know. Probably a journalist who paid off someone in the American justice system. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the full story is about to break. Your involvement, the jewels, the yacht, everything." The coffee cup rattled in Camilla's hand. "Can you stop it?" "No, it's too late. The story goes live tomorrow morning. Every detail. Every message between you and Townsend. Every piece of evidence. The palace has been preparing a response, but there's only so much they can say." Camilla set the cup down before she dropped it. "What does Charles want?" Patricia hesitated. "The king wants you to understand that he cannot protect you from public reaction. He cannot defend your actions. His statement will be brief and factual. Nothing more, of course." Bitterness crept into her voice. "God forbid he show any loyalty." "Loyalty?" Patricia's eyes hardened. "You stole from the crown? You tried to sell your husband's mother's jewels. What loyalty do you deserve?" The words were harsh but true. Camilla had no defense. No moral high ground. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Stay here? You stay silent. You let the storm pass? In 6 months, maybe a year, people will move on. But it's going to be ugly. Worse than before." Patricia left an hour later. Camilla stood at the window, watching the car disappear down the long driveway. The world was about to remember her, not as a queen, not as Charles's great love, but as a thief, a criminal. A cautionary tale. She thought about running, changing her name, disappearing completely. But where would she go? She was 76 years old, tired, done running, so she decided to stay, to face it. Because running had never saved anyone. The story broke like a bomb. Front page of every major newspaper. Lead story on every news broadcast. Social media exploded with outrage and mockery. The details were damning. The evidence overwhelming. Camilla watched it unfold on her monitored phone. Read the comments. The hatred. The glee people took in her destruction. She always was a villain. Karma for what she did to Diana. Prison is too good for her. Some defended her weakly. Talked about desperation, mental health, the pressures of royal life. But those voices were drowned out by the mob. Marie tried to keep the newspapers away, but Camilla insisted on seeing them. She needed to know what people were saying, needed to confront the truth of how she would be remembered. The palace released their statement, brief, cold, clinical. The former queen consort's actions were deeply disappointing and have been dealt with appropriately. The royal family has moved forward and will not be revisiting this matter. Charles said nothing personally. His silence was louder than any condemnation. For 3 days, Camilla stayed inside. The phone rang constantly until she unplugged it. Reporters tried to reach the house, but the gates held them back. On the 4th day, she put on her gardening clothes and went outside. Marie found her pruning roses, hands bleeding from thorns. "Madame, you hurt yourself," Marie said. Alarmed, Camilla looked at her hands. At the blood mixing with dirt. "I'm fine. You should come inside. Rest." "No," Camilla's voice was firm. "I'm done hiding." She worked in the garden for hours. Let the sun burn her face. Let the thorns cut her hands. Let the world see, if anyone was watching, that she was still here, because that's what survival looked like. Not victory. Not redemption. Just the stubborn refusal to disappear. Weeks passed. The story began to fade, as Patricia predicted. New scandals emerged. The world's attention moved on. Camilla remained in her garden. In her small life, in her exile, one morning a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was old. Faded. Camilla and Charles in their 20s, laughing in a field somewhere. She barely remembered when it was taken. But she remembered the feeling. The certainty that they were meant to be together. That love would be enough. On the back in handwriting she recognized immediately. Charles had written, "I'm sorry it ended this way. You deserved better. We both did." No signature. No explanation. Just those words. Camilla held the photograph for a long time. Then she placed it in a drawer. Not thrown away. Not forgotten. Just stored. A piece of history that didn't define her anymore. She walked back to the garden. The lavender was blooming again. Purple and fragrant. Beautiful despite everything, Marie was waiting, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. "Madame looks peaceful," Marie said. Camilla smiled, small and genuine. "I think I might be." It wasn't the life she planned. Wasn't the fairy tale she believed in. But it was hers. Built from ruins. Earned through consequence. The woman who once wore a crown now wore dirt under her fingernails. The woman who once commanded palaces now tended flowers. And somehow, in the quiet of exile, she had found something the crown never gave her, herself. The sun set over the Provence hills, painting everything gold. Camilla stood in her garden, surrounded by things she had grown with her own hands, and felt something close to peace, not forgiveness, not redemption, not absolution, just the simple, hard-won knowledge that she had survived the worst thing that could happen to her, and she was still standing. That would have to be enough, because in the end it was all anyone really got. The chance to survive their mistakes, the choice to keep living despite them. She had made terrible choices, paid terrible prices, lost everything she thought mattered. But she was still here, still breathing, still growing things in the soil and in the mathematics of survival. That was its own kind of victory. The royal guards had surrounded her yacht 2 years ago. They had caught her with the jewels. They had destroyed her life, but they hadn't destroyed her. That, she realized, was the real story. Not the scandal. Not the theft. Not the exile, but the quiet, stubborn persistence of a woman who refused to let shame be her ending. She picked a sprig of lavender and breathed in its scent. Tomorrow, she would wake up and tend her garden again, and the day after that, and the day after that. For as long as she had left, that was enough.